taken thousands of sales calls, and my sales team has taken hundreds and thousands of calls. And in today's video, I'm going to be covering 5 psychological principles that I've spotted over the last 6 years across the hundreds and millions of dollars of revenue that we've generated for our clients. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Now, we've probably all heard this before at one time or another if you're in sales, that 80% of all communication is nonverbal. There's also a pretty famous, I believe, UCLA study that references that 93% of communication is tonality and body language, while the other 7% is the actual words that you choose. And this could not be more true as a salesperson. A lot of people think that because we're remote, you might be doing sales over the phone where you don't actually have body language, or you're on Zoom and you do have body language, that it's not as much of a factor when you're doing virtual sales. It's actually the opposite. You know, when you're doing virtual sales, when you're doing over the phone sales, or you're doing over Zoom, it is so important to remember that your body language and your tonality is key. Even if you're just on the phone and there's no camera, like if you're just on the phone, the body language plays a huge part in how you sound and how you come across, but also in the responses that you elicit from your prospect. Okay, so a lot of people just think about my tonality and my body language as a way to seem more genuine, right? Like you hear a lot of sales leaders and sales coaches or thought leaders talk about this. It's like, well, you want to seem genuine. You want your questions to resonate. You don't want to sound scripted, right? So everybody, for the most part, is talking about tonality as a way to not sound scripted. And while this is true, you don't want to sound scripted when you're on a sales call. When I'm filming this YouTube video, even though I've prepared it and I have scripted it, I don't want to sound scripted while I'm doing this video. There's actually a lot more to it than just not sounding scripted. Your tonality and your body language creates an environment that elicits certain kinds of responses from your prospect. Okay, so if I'm having a great day and my tonality is very upbeat, and I'm very upbeat, I'm speaking with my chest out, I'm happy, I'm speaking with my hands, I'm more likely to elicit those kinds of responses, and I'm more likely to bring my prospect into that kind of state. Versus if I'm lowering, my chest, and I'm lowering my shoulders, and I'm tilting my head, speaking lower, and I'm looking to the left and thinking about what I'm gonna say because I really want what I say to be intentional, then I'm more than likely going to create an environment where my prospect steps into that as well. So it's not that one is good or one is bad. It's just that you have to understand the power of both and when to use it and why you're using it in the first place. Okay, so a really, really good example is if you're selling something that is a very emotional thing, right? Like there might be this big thing that your prospects are all trying to run away from. There might be a lot of needs and emotions attached to that thing. Maybe it's weight loss or something along those lines where there's just a lot of emotion tied to that aspect. You're typically not going to jump on that call and create a really high spirit, high energy sales call. Usually you're going to try to draw out pain, and you're going to try to make their current situation feel worse enough that they're willing to make a change, right? One of the main reasons someone isn't buying is because their current situation, their current reality, they're not perceiving it as worse than the perceived cost of change, right? So if I'm overweight and I'm not at the weight that I want to be at, but I know that to get to my goal weight, I'm going to have to diet, I'm going to have to wake up early, I'm going to have to exercise, I'm going to have to do all these really, really hard things that I have a lot of fear built around. My current weight, my current reality has to be worse than my perceived reality of going through all of that change, right? The perceived effort of going through that change. So when you're on that sales call, your goal sometimes is to make that current state feel worse. And it's not that you're manipulating them or you're making it feel worse than it actually is. It is bad, and they do want to make a change. You just need to bring them to a point where they realize how bad it is right now, and that everything that they have to go through to make it better will be worth it, because it will be better than it is in this current state. So to do that, I'm probably going to jump on the call, and I'm going to ask my questions in a little bit of a lower tone. I'm going to tilt my head a little bit as I ask them. I'm going to sag my shoulders a bit as I ask them, and I'm going to elicit responses that are a little bit more in depth. I'm not going to try to elicit these surface level responses. I'm going to really try to pull out responses that make them feel something. And usually that feeling when we're talking about weight loss is like inadequacy, fear, sadness, XYZ. So I'm going to use that kind of tone as I talk, right? If I'm on a very business to business kind of service or product or offer, I actually kind of want to go to the opposite route. I might not want to be super excited. Might not want to be super upbeat, because that doesn't always come across as super genuine with the prospect. I actually want to go kind of more in the middle with the doctor approach, where I might have like 10 questions that I need to ask them about their numbers. I even sometimes physically have a pad and paper, even though my notes are in the CRM. And as I'm asking them the questions, I'm asking them very fast. I'm speeding them off. I have no emotion attached to them, because I need to create that kind of environment with the prospect where I am the doctor. I'm here to prescribe them a solution to their problem, right? So I kind of create that environment. I ask them, okay, and what was the revenue this year? Okay, profit? All right. And then how much of those expenses was spent on marketing, out of curiosity? Okay. And then leads, how many leads are you guys getting every month? All right. And so I'm asking them these questions literally as a doctor would when he's running you through an examination, right? I might not do that if I'm selling weight loss, right? If I'm selling weight loss and I make the process feel a little too cold, then yes, I might create that doctor to prospect environment, but it's not always what you want to create. So there's all kinds of ways that you can use your tonality to frame the conversation and frame the environment, and all of them will elicit different kinds of responses from your prospect. A really good thing you can do, one, is just look at your current script, look at all the questions you have, and then just practice asking them all in different kinds of ways. Practice asking them, if I wanted to elicit a deeper response, how would I ask it, right? And then do like 3 or 4 different kinds of tonalities, pause at different points. When you want to make emphasis on something, slow down and drag out that word, and record yourself doing it, okay? So this is the best way you can do it. So take a sentence, for example, why did you want to make this change today? Just a really simple question. Why did you want to make this change today? Record yourself, say it normally. Then, let's say I want to elicit a deeper response that has a certain tie-in of like either sadness, fear, anxiety, right? I mean, out of curiosity, Scott, what made you want to make this change today? Right? And then maybe I want to elicit a response that has a little bit more momentum tied to it, right? Maybe I've got a prospect who's very excited about making a change and they've already taken some steps, and I can tell they're excited because they're maybe not running away from something so much as they're running towards something, and I want to make that something bigger and I want to make it feel more realistic. Then I might ask it as, Scott, I love that. And out of curiosity, what made you want to make that change today? And I'm going to lean in, but lean in with my hands and with my shoulders up, versus before I'm kind of leaning down. Or again, I might want to do more of the doctor approach where I'm really trying to prescribe a solution. And okay, and Scott, out of curiosity, what made you want to make that change today? So there's all kinds of ways we can do it. Yeah, so my recommendation is to just write down a question, film yourself, and say it in 5 or 6 different ways, watch it back, and then actually get an understanding of, okay, is it genuine? Does it seem genuine? Is it, will this actually resonate with a prospect? Yes or no? And then, just practice. And that's how you're going to get the hang of it. And actually a really good thought exercise that you can do as well, if this is something that's newer for you, is go back to your sales calls. Go back to your old calls, find a spot, put the transcripts in Claude, for example, and ask Claude, like, what are some areas where I'm getting surface level responses? Or maybe you have a memory of like, okay, well, I'm getting surface level responses. And then listen to how you asked the question. Go to where you asked the question, listen to how you asked it. And I'm sure that there's areas where it's, if you would have asked it just in a little bit of a lower, deeper tone, or you would have slowed it down or sped it up, that you would have gotten more of the responses that you wanted. A no is 10 times more powerful than a yes. I have taken this directly from Chris Voss and from Never Split the Difference, plus a bunch of his training along the way. But it is and has been one of the most impactful things that I've implemented into my own sales process, is eliciting more no's from the prospect versus trying to get a yes. Now, as salespeople, we all think and we all, tie our incomes around getting a yes, right? We all tie our success around getting that yes. Now, as a salesperson, we've kind of been trained in a way to tie our success around getting a yes, right? We get paid when the prospect says, yes, I will sign up or I will buy. The reality is having someone give you a commitment, having someone give you a yes is much, much harder than having them give you a no. But a lot of the times that no can bring you closer to the sale. So I'll dive in, I'll stop being super obscure and I'll dive into some actual real-time examples. But there's a lot of areas in a sales call where we can do this, right? In the opening, we can use this. We can use this after we've pitched our product, after we pitch our service. We can use this as a closing line, like when we actually want to get the close. My recommendation is don't overdo it. You don't want to make it sound too obvious, but there's a lot of areas we can use this in the sales call. So for example, let me explain what I mean by this a little bit more. When I'm trying to elicit a no from my prospect, it's called asking a no-oriented question. So that would be me basically asking a question where the positive response is them saying no, right? So when I cold call someone, for example, I could ask them, is now a good time, or do you have 5 minutes? That would be yes, right? The positive response would be yes. If I flip the script, I can ask them, did I catch you at a terrible time? Right now, if they say no, that is the positive response. That is what I want. I've elicited a no-oriented question. Okay, so this might be basic for some. For some, this might be new to you, but this is just to give you guys a really basic understanding. So when we open up cold calls, we actually do not try to get any sort of yes from the prospect. When people are in fight or flight, they don't want to concede. They don't want to commit. When they're in fight or flight, they don't know you. They don't know what you're talking about. They've just been called out of the blue. There's all kinds of scammers. They don't want to say yes. They don't want to commit. There's like that prehistoric part of the brain that is telling them, hold on, we don't know who this guy is, right? Don't commit anything. So when I ask, is now a terrible time? It's easier for their brain and for their subconscious to respond positively. No, now is not a terrible time. So that's a really basic way we can do it. And it's actually how we open up all of our cold calls. It's the same reason when we open up our cold calls as well, is when they say, no, now is not a terrible time. I don't go into asking a yes-oriented question after that. I go into a double commitment question. So I go, hey, are you a this or are you that? Hey, I saw you applied, but you didn't book a call. Did you get busy or did you not see a time that worked? Right? So I'm still not going to ask for yeses after that. I'm not going to ask super complicated questions because they're still in fight or flight. You need to make it easy. Another time we can do this, and one of my favorite times, is before pitching your product, right? You hear a lot of thought leaders talk about you need permission to pitch. Ask permission to pitch product. Hey, is it cool if I walk you through how we help people? Right? So a really, really good and easy way to do that is just to flip it and do a no-oriented question. It's much easier for the prospect to answer. Another time I use it is after I've pitched the product, right? So after I've done my entire service or product pitch or offer, whatever you want to call it. You want to go ask for the sale. You want to drop the price. You want to do these things, but you're never really sure how to do it. And it's kind of awkward. I usually like to ask a string of no-oriented questions. You actually might have heard, if you've read, I think like Zig Ziglar talks about this, some older school, Grant Cardone probably talks about this, older school sales tactics, they talk about getting 5 yeses, right? Like, hey, is this something you want to do? Yes. Hey, do you want to do this now? Yes. Is it within your range? Yes. And then they ask you these 5 yes questions to build the yes momentum. I forget what it's called, but that's like a very common sales trope. I actually used to do the opposite. I would get like 3 to 4 no-oriented questions in a row asked. So they go, no, 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 and then I would drop price, and then I would go for close. And you can do all of that while framing it in no-oriented questions. So I'll give you a real-time example that you can put in your script today. You've just pitched your product. Now, out of everything I just said, Scott, is there anything missing within the program or service that you feel like would be crucial for you to get results? No, right? The response to that would be no, nothing is missing. Okay, got it. And the 3 hours a week that we talked about, is that like out of reach or unrealistic for you to commit to every week to solving this problem? No, it's not unrealistic. It's not out of reach, right? So now I've gotten 2 no-oriented questions. I'm creating this rhythm of them saying no. All right, wonderful. Great. And we'll dive into the price here in a second, but before we do you have any kind of remaining questions? Anything unclear? No? Okay. Now, had you seen the investment of the program already? No? I know they haven't because we don't show the price. No? Okay. Well, listen, it's a simple, and then I dive into the price drop, right? So I just got 4 no-oriented questions in a row, and then I dive into the price drop. It is so much less conflict for the prospect, and it's so much less tension for the prospect to answer those no-oriented questions. And then the beautiful thing is that because they've told me all these no's and I've asked these questions in a way, I've actually pre-handled objections at the same time. I pre-handled the value, I pre-handled the time, I pre-handled the price in a certain extent. And now I can go and drop my price, right? When I do that on my sales calls, you will get so many less objections. Versus if you're on the call and you're like, and 3 hours a week are you able to commit 3 hours a week to doing this? Then they're going to kind of pull back and, 3 hours a week, maybe I would be able to. You're going to have a much harder time getting that commitment. Versus, is 3 hours a week completely out of this world, impossible for you to commit? Versus you flip it. Is 3 hours a week too much time for you to commit every week towards solving this problem? Most likely they're going to agree with it and they're going to say no. So how do you implement this today? Go through your sales script. If you're doing outbound dials, switch your opening question from a yes-oriented question to a no-oriented question. And then within your sales script, every time you're asking for a commitment, every time you have some sort of yes-oriented question, do your best to switch it to a no-oriented question. It can't be too obvious though, right? Like you can't do the same thing that everyone else is doing. Like, would it be impossible for XYZ, XYZ? If it's too obvious, it just creates a weird conversation. And then what I also would really recommend everyone here do is go after your product pitch. After you've pitched your service, before you've dropped the price, try to fit in 2 to 4 no-oriented questions that simultaneously pre-handle the objections. Is there anything missing, right? Do you have any questions? Anything unclear? Like, these are really easy questions to answer, as well as, is this time commitment per week too much? Is this time to get results too long? Right? You can ask all of these questions that are pre-handling objections in a no-oriented way before you drop the price. And then I always love seeing, had you already seen the investment for the program? No, and then you dive into the actual price. And so if you do all of that and you implement that to your script, I would be shocked if you don't have a pretty large increase in closes without objections at the end of the call. Real quick, if you're watching this video and you're finding any remote shreds of value from what I'm showing and what I'm talking about, it would seriously help out a lot if you subscribed, if you liked the video. 1, it'll help me get this message out to more people who might need it. But 2, you'll get notified as I drop more and more of these videos. And we've got some really cool stuff in the works to dive into sales, business, psychology, everything along those lines. Some people will believe you, but most people will believe themselves. Now, you may have heard me talk about this already, and that's because it is one of the most important and impactful things you can do as a salesperson. But when you want the prospect to believe something to their core, or you want the prospect to step into an identity that will make them a better buyer or a better action taker, it is worth 100, 1,000 times more if they're the ones saying the thing or doing it versus you telling them that they are. So how do you actually do that? The key here is you need to ask your questions in a way that the only way for the prospect to respond to it is to make these kinds of admissions or to step into these identities as your prospect. So for example, if I need a prospect to have urgency, right? If I need a prospect to be urgent about their goals or about their pain or XYZ so that they can make a decision today, which most salespeople probably do need that, I'm going to ask questions in a way that helps them step into that of being an urgent person or having urgency. Okay, so for example, really straightforward example, I want somebody to sign up today, right? That's my goal when I'm on that sales call with them. So one of the things I always like to ask, is I like to ask why now, right? Out of curiosity, Scott, what made you want to do this today? Now, they might have jumped on the call and had no intention of doing this today, right? They might have jumped on the call and just been wanting to shop around or this or that. But if I start asking them like questions that make them want to shop around, they're going to want to shop around. Versus I switch it. I ask them, what made you want to do this today? The only way for them to answer that is to subconsciously agree that they actually do want to do this today in one way, shape, or form, right? And you might need to pull it back a little bit. You know, what made you want to make this change today? Or what made you want to solve your lead problem today? Or whatever you're selling. I'm just doing a generic example. So you might need to walk it back. But the only way for them to answer that is to agree that they want to do something today, right? Another really good way to do that is I always like to ask people, how long have you been wanting to do this, right? Like, hey, Scott, out of curiosity, I know you've been in business for the last few years. Like, how long have you struggled with this lead problem? Or if it's like you're selling for someone with a personal brand, how long have you been following XYZ person? And they tell you, let's say they tell you, and it's been really long, right? They tell you, oh, I've been wanting to solve this for the last 3 years. Now it's like even more impactful, like, oh, 3 years. Out of curiosity, you know, what made you want to solve this today? Right? I've now got them to agree and I've got them to elicit that, wow, they've been wanting to do this for a long time. And now I go in and I ask the why now, why today? And then all of a sudden, they're going to be answering your questions as a person that wants to solve this today, which happens to be a better prospect for me, right? So that's a really easy way you can do it, right? And then when let's say they answer it, well, I wanted to solve it today because I've been looking at this for so long and I've really just been flirting with all these different ideas, but I've never gotten a real expert to help me do it, right? And now they've told me that they need an expert. And this is just an example. They could say 1,000 things, but random example. Versus if I had just told them, hey, what made you, or if I had just told them, yeah, you need an expert to solve this. Versus them telling me, I've been looking at this for so long. What made me want to do it today is I've realized that I can't do it on my own. I need to find an expert who's already been there and done that. Right? Like they've now told me this, they've now admitted this. That is a much stronger tie down for them than me telling them ever will be. And that's what I meant by the prospect will always believe themselves, and they'll sometimes rarely believe what you tell them. And now even better, they've just told me this. I can even level it one step deeper and I can label it, right? It sounds like you've tried thousands of things and you've realized that, I love using that you've realized, it creates this kind of epiphany moment for them. And you've realized that if you had just brought in an expert in sooner, you could have probably saved yourself the last 3 years of trial and error, right? So now again, I'm not saying you could have saved yourself the last trial and error, right? The last 3 years of trial and error. I'm saying you've realized that. I'm putting it into their mouth as it's their own words. So these kind of minor things that you can do, the way you ask your questions and then the way you label, all of a sudden it's not you telling them, it's them telling you and then you reaffirming what they've said in deeper ways. So hopefully that wasn't too convoluted or complex. I'll probably do a whole video just on this topic at one point or another, but it truly is one of the most impactful things you can do in your sales calls is ask your questions in a way that elicits the responses from your prospect to help them step into being an urgent person, or step into the identity you need to be a buyer, or step into them needing to make a change, for example. People only make a change when the cost of staying the same becomes much larger than the cost of changing. Now, I talked about this a little bit above, I believe, in the first psychological principle, but it's so important that it deserves its own little bucket here in this video. And it's that humans are hardwired to stay safe. The reason we've survived this long as a species, as humans, is because we've been hardwired as a species to keep ourselves out of danger and to keep ourselves safe. Now, your prospect might be in a really, really tough and hard situation. They might not be happy. They might hate their job. Let's say you're selling like a kind of build a business or, launch a new business or biz op kind of service or offer. They might wake up every morning and dread going to work. They might get home from work and be drained and not have any energy for their families. And they know that their situation sucks and they hate their situation. But sometimes, and actually a lot of the times, they'll still choose that every day over the unknown, over the cost of changing. Because when that cost of changing is completely unknown, their brain is hardwired to avoid it. And that's why you might be somebody who takes risks, and you might be somebody who's burned boats or burned bridges, one of those two. You might be somebody who does that, and so you have a very hard time connecting with another person who lives in this unhappiness. But the truth is there's way more people who are stuck in that frame than there are like yourself who's probably watching this video right now. And that's just psychology. Like that's just the reality of how our brains are wired. So it will pay you much more as a salesperson to lean into that and to not fight it and try to pull people out of it. How do you do that? There's a couple ways. One, you can make their current situation feel worse, right? I kind of talked about this before, where you get them to admit these things about their current situation that they're just frankly not willing to accept. And these are the things that people are just probably not willing to even voice out loud to themselves. They might have never even voiced it out loud. And then all of a sudden on this sales call, they now are starting to agree with these things. And they're like, yeah, this is horrible. I need to make a change. I don't care what the cost is. I need to change this now, right? So if you can make that current situation bigger if you can make that current situation worse, then that will help a lot, right? How do you do that? Like I said before, your tonality, you drop down, you ask more impactful questions, and then you label beyond what they're telling you. So if someone tells you, for example, that, they want to lose the weight because they can't play with their kids, right? Now, if I just say, oh, that's great, and then I move on, versus I label it. I mean, Scott, it sounds like you're not showing up as the kind of father you can be. And, you know, maybe at one point this was just a weight thing and you wanted to look a certain way or feel a certain way, but now it's, you know, you're not showing up as the kind of father you know you can be, right? So that kind of label is going to get him to, again, go a level deeper, right? And I'm making that current situation worse, because now it's not about the 5 pounds. It's about the dad. It's about his kids. It's about showing up, right? Or like if someone's trying to start a business to, you know, get out of their job because they never see their kids, they never see their wives, their marriage is falling apart. I could talk about the job, or I could talk about the business and how I'll help them make $5,000 a month in their business. Or I could talk about them being able to show up as a better husband, as a better man, a better father. Those are much more impactful conversations, right? So I've taken that current situation, I've made the pain worse for it. And I know it sounds a little cruel, I guess, when you say it that way, that you want to make their pain worse, but sometimes you have to, you know, and a lot of the times you have to really help somebody, you have to help them understand that their situation is, you have to really help them start to say the things that they don't want to say out of fear for what they actually mean. The other way you can do it is you can make what they're running towards bigger, right? Or more clear, right? The kind of cost to change, a lot of times the cost actually isn't that great. It's just the uncertainties around the change. So if you could kind of paint that picture much clearer as to what's going to be required for them and make it sound more doable and make it sound more realistic, then you'll have people that are more willing to go through that endeavor and go through that cost. And then the last thing you can do is the actual end goal. You can make that much bigger, right? So they've got their current situation, they've got the change that's all unknown, and then they've got their end goal. Now, if you can make that end goal much bigger and create momentum on the sales call and get them excited about it and make it more believable that they'll hit it, but also make the results bigger and have more impact tied to it, then that will help as well, you know, because now, again, the cost of staying the same becomes less than the cost of changing, because the thing they're going to get is so much greater at the other end, right? So the weight loss is a perfect example of this, right? Like I can help you lose 5 pounds, or I can help you show up as a better dad, right? And showing up as a better dad is a much more impactful goal for that person to hit, and they're going to be willing to sacrifice a lot more to do it, including their current situation. So hopefully that wasn't too convoluted. When we talk about a lot of these psychology things, we can get a little bit kind of complex, because a lot of these things don't really have names and they don't really have like repeatable one-liners that you can use, but you have to start to understand at a deeper level how to bring your prospects into these identities and into these environments where you can create action takers more frequently. People buy from people they trust. How do you get a prospect to trust you? There's actually hundreds of ways to do that. I'm going to talk about a few, but truly this is crucial to you getting deals done on the phone, because if your prospect does not trust you or does not believe you or does not connect with you in any way, shape, or form, then you're probably not going to get very far on your sales calls. Okay. So the classic way to get a prospect to trust you is to relate to them, right? Like you hear people talk about this all the time, maybe not so much anymore, but you see people do it. It's kind of a little bit older school. People still do it though, right? Like a prospect gets on the phone and then you find out their hometown. And you're like, oh yeah, well my dog's aunt's cousin went to high school in their hometown. And you try to like relate to them in one way, shape, or form. I actually think this is relatively surface level. Now, if you have a genuine opportunity to connect with someone through relatability, then take it, right? Like if someone actually did go to the high school that you went to and you have a shared experience in that realm, yeah, definitely bring it up, use it, like use that as a way to connect, sure. But there are much stronger ways to create trust in a sales call. Probably the easiest one that you can do, especially if you're doing outbound, if you're doing cold calling, the easiest one you can do is just make somebody laugh. If you can get a laugh out of somebody or like a smile, it releases all tension. They start to trust you more. People don't usually laugh with people they don't like or they don't trust. So subconsciously, they start to just align with you a little bit more. So I used to always have like 3 to 5 jokes racked up in my chamber that I would use at certain points in the sales call. Most of them I actually stole from our CSO, Daniel, because he kind of commandeered this when we were selling together. But one of them, for example, is if a prospect had a really hard name to pronounce, people's names, they're really connected to their names, right? They live with it their whole life. It's part of their identity. It is probably the most important part of their identity. If you ask someone who they are, the first thing they'll tell you is their name, right? So it's the thing they tie the most to their identity. If you can make a joke about their name in a way that lightens things up, not in an offensive way, it often really, really helps loosen up the sales call and create like a little bit of trust, right? So if I've got somebody that has a hard to pronounce name, I'll try to pronounce it. I'd be like, and I don't want to get this wrong, and I'll try to pronounce it. Is it XYZ? And then if they say yes or no, no matter what they say, I say, okay, perfect. I spent the last 5 minutes here trying to pronounce it in the mirror to make sure I got it right. And just something so simple like that, it will always make them giggle, always make them laugh, and just show them that you're a little bit more intentional about the call. It works really, really well. So I used to have a lot of these kind of in the bank. I used to also do this when it came time to close and like tension was high and you're trying to close out the call. Having like a joke or two when there's high tensions really helps, right? So if somebody's like, hey, like I really want to think about it or whatever it is, I'd be like, well, hey, if you like, I could turn off my camera. I'm gonna go grab a glass of water because I'm spitting up cement over here after talking for the last 30 minutes. And I'll give you just a couple seconds to go over it with your spouse or whatever it is. And so just something like that, just getting a little laugh really helps. Another really easy one is like we used to frame our calls. We used to ask like, hey, on this call, we try to arrive at either a yes or no conclusion. Either one's fine by me. I don't have any horses in the race. We just try to avoid the more ambiguous answers like, I need to think about it, or I need to talk to my spouse or my dog's aunt's niece, because those usually just mean no, and you're probably trying to be a little too polite to say it. And I'm a big boy, I can take it, right? So like kind of like using that moment of the call where there's high tension, I'm asking for commitment early in the call. Having a joke in there, having something where you can create humor really, really helps. So that is one way that you can create trust. Another way, and this is the best way to create trust on your sales calls, is just to understand the prospect's problems and situation better than they understand it themselves, and be able to phrase it back to them better than they could tell it to you. So if they've got these problems and you're an expert in their problems and you know their problems and you label the emotions behind their problems deeper than what they're telling you, and they're like, this guy gets it, and they feel like you understand them, they will follow your lead on the sales call much more than if that wasn't the case. So if you can show the prospect that you understand them, you understand their problem, you understand them, their industry, their pain, their feelings, through your labels, your questions, your tonality, by doing these things, you will create trust within your prospect. And that is real rapport. Having the prospect truly believe that you get them is a rapport stronger than any other weather or sports team or hometown could ever create, because most people go through their entire lives feeling like they've never really had someone who understood them. Most people, you might, and if that's the case, you're lucky, but most people feel like their entire lives they're misunderstood. And if you can jump on that call and in 15 minutes show them that you get them and that you understand, then it's gonna feel like they just took off a 100-pound backpack that they've been carrying for their entire life. And they're gonna believe and trust what you have to say much, much more. So that is the 5 psychological principles that are happening beneath the surface on all of your sales calls. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully you can take all of these and implement them into your script and into your process right away. But here's the catch. You could be the best salesperson in the world. You could have the best psychology and the best identity selling in the world. But if you can't get people to show up to your sales calls, then you will only get so far as a salesperson or a business owner. You can only close so many people if they're just not showing up. So if you click this link and watch this video here, I talk about how to get your show rate from 20% up to 70% without changing your marketing and without trying 1,000 different reminder sequences and so on and so forth. So watch that video, learn how to improve your show rate, and I will catch you guys on the next one.